Duskendale had been his finest hour, yet the memory tasted bitter on his tongue. It was his failures that haunted him at night, though. Jaehaerys, Aerys, Robert, 3 dead kings. Rhaegar, who would have been a finer king than any of them. Princess Elia and the children. Aegon just a babe. Rhaenys with her kitten. Dead, every one, yet he still lived, who'd sworn to protect them. The Queenmaker, A Dance with Dragons. There's a good argument to be made that Barristan Selmy is the last true knight in Westeros. In an era where ideals like loyalty and honor are being forgotten by many characters in the story, Barristan the Bold may be the only one who adheres strongly to principles, even to a fault. Being a relic from an older time, he struggles with the moral corruption of the modern day, in contrast with the up-and-coming knights and rulers who are often ready to break the rules for their own gain. While the show and many theories have suspected that Barristan's death is near, I think there's a very interesting potential route for his character in the endgame of the story. He rose quickly to success in knighthood, being knighted at 16, named to the Kingsguard at 23, and defeating Malus the Monstrous to put down the last Blackfire rebellion. Because of this, he earned high honors and a heroic status, which made him an almost legendary figure. He continued to find success in tourneys and as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, as the ideal example of knightly virtues. But his virtue was opposite of King Aerys, who he served. While he had success defeating enemies of the crown, the real enemy within became more and more dangerous. A few years before Robert's rebellion, Aerys was captured by the Darklings in the defiance of Duskendale. Barristan nobly served his king and defeated the enemy, but he sometimes wonders if he really did the right thing. If he'd let Aerys die, Rhaegar would have ascended to the throne, and an untold number of people would have lived. But regret would continue to pile up for Barristan the Bold as the rebellion started to fester. During the tourney at Harrenhal, Barristan lost to Rhaegar in the joust, which allowed him to name Lyanna the Queen of Love and Beauty. Barristan thinks that if he could have defeated Rhaegar, that whole situation could have been avoided. But that was not the only thing he came to regret then. It is implied that he was in love with the Shara Dane and danced with her at the tourney, yet he was unable to break his vows for her. With the knowledge that he was partially responsible, Barristan fought in Robert's rebellion, on the side of Aerys and Rhaegar. After losing the war, Barristan was pardoned and allowed to join Robert's Kingsguard. Because of this, he starts feeling the moral decay of Westerosan chivalry, especially because of Jaime Lannister. He dislikes him for being a Kingslayer, the complete opposite of knightly loyalty. But that's mostly a projection on his part, since he, too, might have broken his vows numerous times in the past, especially to kill Aerys. But he would continue to serve reluctantly in the Kingsguard up until the beginning of the series. Even though he has a reputation for being a mindless soldier, he does push back on one order near the end of his reign. He refuses King Robert's suggestion to kill Daenerys, and Ned Stark is the only one to side with him. Ned makes the point that Barristan was given mercy and proved to be a loyal servant, and Daenerys should be treated the same. Their opinions are overlooked, however, and with Ned Stark resigning, Barristan is the only person left in the Red Keep who would dare question the Lannisters. After failing to protect Robert, Barristan's dismissed from the Kingsguard by Joffrey, with a little help from Varys. There are a million things for him to be angry about in this situation. The code of honor he dedicated his life to is easily broken. He's blamed for the death of all the kings he served, and Jaime Lannister, who he despises, is to take his position. Though he threatens the king and kills 2 gold cloaks who pursue him, he swiftly leaves King's Landing in search of a new, better king to die in service of. Though he entertains the idea of Stannis destroying King's Landing for a moment, he decides to seek out the exiled Targaryen line. Yours, if you'll have me. Sir Barristan had tears in his eyes. I took Robert's pardon, I served him in the Kingsguard and Council, served with the Kingslayer and others near as bad, who soiled the white cloak I wore. Nothing will excuse that. I may be serving in King's Landing still if that vile boy upon the Iron Throne had not cast me aside, it shames me to admit. But when he took the cloak that the white bull had draped about my shoulders and sent men to kill me that self-same day, it was as though he'd ripped a caul off my eyes. That was when I knew I must find my true king and die in his service. He never brings it up to Dany, but it's an interesting thing that he doesn't go to Robb, Renly, or especially Stannis, who could also be considered a true king, and had a more likely chance of gaining power at the time. But there are two reasons he might seek out the last Targaryens. First, he has an admiration for Rhaegar, who he feels would have made a good king, even though he failed him. But he also might be letting his bitterness towards the Lannisters get the best of him, resonating with the other outcast who is not shown mercy by Robert. Who knows what would have happened if he joined another side and fought for Stannis, or maybe even Robb Stark or Renly. Regardless, he seeks out the sister of the man he failed, hoping to undo one of his many regrets. There's not too much to cover for most of his time with Daenerys, besides some small disagreements, and the occasional suicide mission because Daenerys was angry at him. He also does stare down Drogon when the dragons escape, which is kind of insane. He's able to advise her pretty well, until the chaos at the end of A Dance with Dragons. In the Queen's absence, he takes control as the Hand, and commands the battle against the Yunkai. That leads us to the preview chapter of Winds, where Barristan motivates his troops to battle. For now, and probably for a long time, this will be the dead end for his story, from which we can only theorize about what he may do next. With the need to kill a bunch of POV characters off next, and the perilous situation he's faced with, many have suggested that Barristan will meet a swift end during the Battle of Fire. This also aligns with one of his parallels, Criston Cole. While they have numerous similarities, I don't know if things will perfectly match up for his death, and probably not during the Battle of Fire. Both Barristan and Criston were prodigy knights who took a decisive side in the Civil War, serving as hand of the king or queen, and maybe being destined for failure. Barristan's chapter titles are all inversions of Cole's titles, such as Queenmaker referencing Cole as the Kingmaker, with, spoilers for House of the Dragon, Criston Cole dying pointlessly and losing the war. Some argue that Barristan will have the same role, but I think that drawing that comparison too soon means that many of the same plot points won't mesh up. If he were to die in the Battle of Fire, he would at least have some sense of accomplishment and have fulfilled his dream of dying for the right ruler. But people with shallow ideals are never spared in Westeros, and giving Barristan the chance to mindlessly serve another questionable ruler wastes the chance of giving him a compelling character arc in the future. We know that Martin's philosophy is that the human heart in conflict with itself is the only thing worth writing about. There's a difficult decision to be made in Barristan's future, and it leads to a crossroad in his path, both of which would be full of guilt and confusion about his loyalties. Let's start with the first path, where he stays with Dany. When she comes back to Meereen with her desire for fire and blood, Barristan will continue to side with Daenerys, just like he did with her father. By the time her invasion of Westeros comes, he'll have a chance to enact revenge against the Lannisters and all the others who wronged him. But another enemy he may face is the last Blackfyre, Aegon VI. With all of his greatest enemies taking the stage in the upcoming war, he has a motive to serve Dany, no matter how much she leans into fire and blood. To what extent Dany goes mad, if at all, is a pretty contentious topic that's really up to the reader to predict. But I think that for the invasion of Westeros, she'll be just as cold and pragmatic as the resurrected Jon Snow. Where Barristan will draw the line, if at all, is the question. He could amend for serving Aerys by going against Dany, or he might resign to go all out towards the noble death he searches for. But there's another opportunity for who he could serve. While he may end up fighting against the last Blackfyre, there's a chance he could unknowingly fight on his side. One part of Criston Cole's story which doesn't align with Barristan's as how spurned romance fuels their downfall. Barristan has his own lost love with the Shara, but that didn't cause any change in his intentions. The girl who reminds him of Ashara, though, may have to force him out of her service. If Barristan's qualms with her become too much, or if outside influence from her new advisors make him less important, he may be forced out of her circle, despite his loyal service. Barristan being in love with Dany is extremely questionable, but he's already thought about how much she reminds him of Ashara, especially with her purple eyes. Like Jorah and Littlefinger, a lot of the creepy old guys in Westeros have some kind of lost love who reminds them of their new love interest. Even after all these years, Sir Barristan could still recall Ashara's smile, the sound of her laughter. He had only to close his eyes to see her, with her long dark hair tumbling about her shoulders, and those haunting purple eyes. Daenerys has the same eyes. Sometimes, when the Queen looked at him, he felt as if he was looking at Ashara's daughter. A Dance with Dragons, the Kingbreaker. The next best choice for him would be on Aegon VI's side, upon which everyone believes he's the legitimate son of Rhaegar. This is enough to give him incentive to join, but he also shares a lot of similarities with Jon Connington. Both of them fought against Robert and have the desire to avenge Rhaegar. Also, Aegon may be trying to find important relics to support his legitimacy. Many suspect that Varys has the Valyrian steel sword Blackfire, and Darkstar may be headed his way with Dawn. Having Barristan Selmy to support any claimant is an important part of convincing the common people, which Robert Baratheon recognized. But trying to guess any further beyond this is just speculation. For all we know, Aegon might just die of grayscale before he leaves Essos. Whether it's on Daenerys' side or against her, Barristan's path will take him to the breaking point of his morals, forcing the last noble knight in Westeros to give up his battle or hold firmly to his ideals until his death. While he waits now in Essos, the land of exiles and second sons, a time will come when the overlooked and disgraced will return to Westeros for revenge against those who scorn them, with Barristan leading the charge. All of his failures and regrets will be manifest in the upcoming war, giving him a chance to redeem himself and die in service of the true ruler who he's always been searching for. But it may be more likely that Barristan the Bold will meet a pointless death without glory, a tragic end for the last of the true knights.